Hello and welcome to another lesson by Soflex Math. Today we're going to be continuing our place value journey, but specifically we're going to talk about how to use the different forms that a number can look. So we have the standard form, word form, and expanded form. So we're going to give a couple examples with whole numbers, and then we'll do a couple of examples with decimals today. So let's get started. So obviously we need to start off with a number. So kind of like the biggest number we've gone with was place value of 1,000,000. So let's give an example like that. So as we read this number, 7,324,562, so that already is in standard form. That's the way you usually see numbers. That's the way you guys usually think about numbers. And the next two, especially word form, is pretty self-explanatory. We're going to actually write out the value 7,324,562, okay, using words, and we'll still separate it by commas in the same spots where those original commas are. So as we go through this example, we'll just kind of see how we see the numbers and the labels as we go through step by step. So as you can see here in blue, I've rewritten the number with the same value with words. So if you look at the 7,000,000, so as we can see, the 7 is here in the millions place value, so 7,000,000, comma, comma, and then we're going to group the next three together. We'd read that number as 324, so I'm going to write it as 324, and then wherever it ends, that's our place value, 1,000. Then the next, we have a comma, comma, and then 562. 562. So there it is in word form. Notice how we do not have the word and anywhere, because remember from our last lesson, and represents a decimal point. So when we do some decimal examples, then we'll be able to see that. Okay. All right. And our third way is the expanded form. So that's where those place values, when in our first lesson where we wrote the 7,000,000 and what's the value of the 7, and we wrote it as 7, comma, 000, comma, 000. That's what we're going to do for expanded form. So it's kind of like a long addition sentence. So we're going to start with the 7,000,000. So we're going to write it as 7,000,000. And then each place value, we're just going to add the value or the number. So the 3 is in the 100,000s. So we're going to write it as 300,000 plus, remember I said it's like a big addition problem, 20,000 plus, I'm going to have to go to another line here, 4,000 plus 500 plus 60 and plus 2. So these are our three forms. So we have our standard form, which is the number that we're used to. We have the word form, where you write it in actual words, write out everything, the 7, the numbers, plus the labels, all written out in word form. And then finally we have expanded form, where we're taking the value and the place value and putting that together into an addition sentence. So all three of these mean the exact same thing. They are just represented in different ways. So we're going to do another example here, and I'm going to include a 0 to see how to deal with that when we're writing it out in these different forms. Okay, our next example is 3,068. So notice how we have the 0 in the hundreds place. So we need to know how to deal with that. Now writing it in our normal way, that's not really a big deal, because we always write standard form. It's pretty easy, 3,068. But how do we represent that? Well, here's our 3. So the 3,000, 3 in the thousands place value is pretty easy. But now we don't have to write anything about hundreds, because there are no hundreds. So now we just take the number 68 and comma 68. So 3,000 comma 68. So you can hopefully see how we didn't, the 0 is still assumed, but we don't have to say 0 hundreds 68. We just write it without that. Okay, and then the same thing, we're going to skip over it when we do our expanded form. So we have the place value of the 3,000s plus, there's no hundreds, so it's blank, plus the 60 for the tens column, and then the 8. So take a look at those three for an example using a 0. And then we're going to take a look at how we would do these three things with a decimal as well. Okay, on our next screen here, you can see that we have a number now in blue with a decimal. So 26 and 35 hundredths. So remember, if you can read these numbers, all you have to do is write what you say. So it's important that we don't say 26.35, but we actually read it correctly, because if you can read it, you can write it. So we want to make sure that we're saying 26 and 35 hundredths. And as you can see in yellow, exactly what I just said. So we have 26 and 35 hundredths. And I made sure to underline the THS to make sure that we have the THS. Okay, and then also, as we see in purple, so we've gone on and now written an expanded form. So we have 20 plus 6. So there's our whole numbers. We don't have to say and. We already know that because when we are at our 3/10, we know that the decimals as part of the expanded form. So 3/10 plus 5 hundredths. So when you put that together, you'd put 26 and kind of the plus sign of the and would be here. Why? Because we have our decimals starting 35 hundredths. Okay, so all three of those once again have the exact same value. So let's take a look at one more decimal example. Okay, so taking a look at our last example here with a decimal, we have 4 and 378 thousandths. Once again, practice reading these. So when you read that, take a look at the next in green, our word form. So we have 4 and 378 thousandths. Notice the THS at the end again. And then finally in the light blue, there is our expanded form. So 4 plus 0 and 3/10 plus 0 and 7 hundredths plus 0 and 8 thousandths. So what I'd like you to realize is that when you're looking at this, sometimes you'll have trouble reading these. So what you're really going to want to do here is read the 378. Whatever you see here, just read it as a whole number. Pretend that the 4 and is not there. So how would you read 378? Exactly, 378. And then it ends in the thousandths place value, so that's the label we put on. That's why we just write it as 378 with the thousandths label. So pretty easy there. So let me show you one more item before we move on to our next lesson. All right, one final note. Let's say that we don't have any whole numbers, so we have a 0 and situation. So here we have 0 and 26 hundredths. So I've seen people write it two different ways, and both are really the same answer, and both I would consider correct. So some people actually write out the 0, so they use that place value. So 0 and 26 hundredths. Other people just skip that as if it's not there and just write the 26 hundredths, and that's in the purple. So once again, either of those are correct. So if you don't have any whole numbers and you're just writing a decimal, once again, you can just write it either way. Both would be acceptable and correct. So once again, leave any comments or any questions, and I'll be happy to answer those. And once again, thanks for watching Soflex Math.